everyone. I'm Steve Evans. Well, all the big boys were invited to the party, and all of them are SVP'd. But there's a few that wish they'd gone to a different dance. Some top names did not qualify for this tight 8-car field, and they include Kenny Bernstein, who is having a terrible year, blew up everything he owned at Gainesville Raceway and had to reload. Eddie Hill, the current Winston champion, hasn't fired a shot this year and didn't here in Rockingham. Big surprise, though, former winner of this race and 5-time Winston champion Joe Amato, he also is not around to play on race day. Another DNQ, North Carolina's own Doug Herbert. He definitely wished he'd stayed home in bed. Watch this. A spectacular engine explosion, a very expensive one. 4 cylinders laying on the racetrack, 4 still in the race car. Doug, the forces that it takes to blow an engine completely in half, I can't even comprehend.
Oh, I can't even believe it. I heard a boom. I thought it banged the blower, and when I hopped out, I've never seen anything like that before, unfortunately.
What can cause that kind of a chain reaction? Any idea at all?
Crankshaft had a break, I imagine, had to be what happened. I felt some kind of a weird little vibration when I was staging, but it's can't really think about it.
You're okay. That's what's important.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, the crowd is saying, Evans, accentuate the positive. So I will. Among the cars that did qualify, the defending champion, Scott Coletta. In fact, he qualified number 1. Last year, he broke 4 motors to win it. He's gone through 3 just in qualifying. Is he willing to pay the price to win it again? And he has his father, Connie, on the opposite side of the ladder. Some of the other big boys, Don, the Snake Prudhomme, the Final Strike Tour, running tremendously well here at Rockingham. He will race the Smokin' Joe's car of Jim Head in the first round. Now for the funny car slant, who knows more than Dave McClellan?
Steve, over in Casey Spurlock's pit, there's quite a conference going on between crew chiefs. Of the number 1 qualified car, the Western Auto Slick 50 Dodge of Al Hoffman, that's Tommy Anderson chatting with Ronnie Swearingen, who is the head wrench for Casey Spurlock, the driver of the Fruit of the Loom Dodge. Now, this is an interesting story. Here at Rockingham Dragway, there was a complete repaving over the winter. New asphalt plus an extension of the concrete pad. It is super smooth, and it has yielded one of the very rare 300-mile-an-hour speeds by a funny car, as Al Hoffman blasted out low qualifying time of a 5:02 at 300.80.
Get your wits about you here, boy. 5:02, 300 miles an hour.
Yeah, well, I don't know where that all came from, but we've been working on a new combination here. I'm struggling with it. It looks like it's coming around.
You were not qualified going into this last session.
Nah, Tommy says, what do you want to do? He says, you want to try to get in the show, or do you want to try to
rotate the earth?
Right. I said, let's go for it. I said, we came here to test. Let's do it. And beautiful.
That made you $10,000.
300 miles an hour or not, I still kind of like Hollywood Spurlock. He won the opening event of the season, that out at Pomona in the Winter Nationals. He qualified here with a 5:18. That put him 4th, and he should take care of Paul Smith, who was a bit of a surprise when he made the number 5 spot at a 5:21. Now, for the full story on Pro Stock Racing, here's Bob Fry.
Dave, everybody that follows Pro Stock drag racing this year knows the story really has been 4 cars. The 2 Oldsmobiles of Warren and Kurt Johnson, and the 2 Dodges of Darrell Alderman and Scott Jeffreyon. Well, the guy that drives this purple car, Larry Morgan, has begun to change all of that. In round number 1, it was Larry Morgan up against Kurt Johnson, half of that dynamic Oldsmobile team. Morgan flat out ran Kurt Johnson with a 7:13 up on the scoreboard. That was good enough to put the Ohio driver into round number 2. And that, ladies and gentlemen, in drag racing terms, is an upset. Now that Larry has disposed of the kid, things don't get a whole lot easier. He's got Warren Johnson coming up in the 2nd round. I don't think Dad's going to be very happy that you picked on his kid that way, Larry.
Yeah, I know, and sometimes he'll really get back at you, too. He ran a 7:08 the first round, so we'll just see what we can do to him this round. I'm going to have to cut a good light and make an excellent round, or we won't be in the semifinals.
This track's been very good to you over the years. You've been in the finals twice here at the Winston Select Invitational.
Well, we've done real well here, and we're proud of it. We sure like to get in the final again.
Now, if he does that, he will have taken out the entire Johnson clan, and then who knows, to win this thing, he might also have to beat Scott Jeffreyon and Darrell Alderman. That's 4 plenty tough cars. Steve?
Well, Pro Stock was a 16-car field, so the first round was run earlier. Now all 3 pro categories have 8 cars left. First round of top fuel, Don, the Snake Prudhomme, the Skull Bandit. What a final strike tour he is having, Dave McClellan. I don't think I've ever seen him smile this much.
Steve, it was not that long ago in Houston, Texas, where that smile was a mile wide because he won his first race here in 1994, his last year as a driver. Now, there is some conjecture that the Skull Bandit may be around with Don Prudhomme as a car owner and another driver in the cockpit. But the Snake says he hadn't made up his mind yet. Here's his opponent in round number 1, the Smokin' Joe's racing car. This is Jim Head. Based upon their qualifying positions, this should be a very close drag race.
In fact, Jim had qualified about 100th of a second quicker than Don Prudhomme, so he will have the lane choice, and he has selected that far side, which has been favored by even the pro stock racers, psychologically or not. They seem to like that lane.
One thing to keep in mind when we talk about Top Fuel and the DNQs, those folks that we will not see as part of our coverage today, this is only an 8-car field, so it is quite a tribute to Jim Head and the Candies and Hughes team that he is part of it. For Don Prudhomme, his number 5 qualifying time was a 4.87 second elapsed time. It was tough just to be in this show.
Absolutely. In fact, some of the non-qualifiers, like Kenny Bernstein, were not all that unhappy. Had it been a 16-car point field, they'd have been right in the middle of it. They learned a lot testing, and even some of the non-qualifiers were paid out of this first. So there is Jim Head, the raw fuel, coming out of the headers. His team car, Gordy Bonin in the Smokin' Joe's funny car, did not qualify. Only 100th of a second difference between these two cars. Ooh, good start, both drivers. Jim Head gets a little sideways, and the Snake pokes his nose out there to win it. At 491, 291 miles an hour, his crew chief Wes Cerny being very, very conservative.
Here is Connie Coletta, the patriarch of the American International Airways team, taking on the young Tommy Johnson Jr., driving the Mopar Express Loop car. Now let's go down to the far end of this racetrack, where Steve Evans has caught a snake.
Well, the Snake starts his final strike at Rockingham with a very pleasant 491.
Oh, that's real good. We didn't know how the track was going to be. Wes Cerny, the whole Scobana crew, they're doing a great job. Just nice to win at the Rock, you know, get around in, and especially on my last year.
The track is good.
Boy, it seems to be. Yeah, we just were a little bit soft, to be honest with you, but yeah, I think he made the right choice. Just get down through there the first round.
Win 2 more, and you got a lot of cash.
Thanks a lot.
It was back in 1992 that Don Prudhomme picked up the cash here at the Winston Select Invitational. That is Wendy Johnson out in front of her brother. She's a champion in her own right. She won in Super Comp Eliminator last season.
Connie Coletta, at the age of 55, at least that's what he admits to, comes back into drag racing full-time with a vengeance out of Ypsilanti, Michigan. If his Air Force was rated internationally, it'd be the 20th largest. Tommy Johnson Jr. He doesn't have an Air Force, doesn't even have a mini bike. Out of Ottumwa, Ohio, every time he's got is wrapped up in this top fuel dragster.
Again, this is an indication of how close this field is. Connie Coletta qualified 3rd at a 484. Tommy Johnson Jr. was 6th at a 489. 0.05 of a second difference on paper as they approach the staging team.
Connie Coletta, certainly with a huge age and experience, back to the 50s. Oh, but it's Tommy Johnson Jr. away first. Coletta charges and can't get him. Oh, Connie will not like his time slip. It'll tell him he ran 0.03 of a second quicker than did Tommy Johnson Jr., but Tommy Johnson Jr. will advance to round number 2.
Now back at the starting line, talk about youth. This is one of them here in the near lane. It is Corey McLenithan at the wheel of the McDonald's dragster. You want youth? Take a look at the guy waving to the crowd on the other side in the Castrol Syntec car. That's Pat Austin.
Was he really waving to the crowd? I thought it was just like a papal wave.
No, it's more like the Rose Parade wave, you know?
There is Lee Beard, none better. Crew chief for McDonald's on their top fuel dragster. Crew chief running around on the starting line. The Dynamax car there is Walt Austin, the patriarch of the family from Tacoma, Washington. Pat Austin, one of the winningest drivers in history if you throw in all of his alcohol funny car victories. His top fuel career hasn't been quite that quick to take off. Corey McLenithan parked his own car at the end of the season and is now the full-time hired gun for the fast food chain out of Chicago, Illinois.
Pat Austin certainly flew here, though. Number 2 qualifier at a 484. Corey Mack, the best he could muster, a 489. Still very tight between these two cars. Hard to say here who's got the advantage youth-wise. They're only a couple of years apart. Both over 300 miles an hour previously. And a great start.
A great start, a great race at half track. Look at this one. Oh, what dramatic racing we're seeing today. Corey McLenithan wins it at 490 to Pat Austin's 4.94. They left the starting line as if there was one throttle foot.
You're watching Sky Sports.
I'm Steve Evans along with Dave McClellan and Bob Fry, and that is a young lady named Rochelle. It'll be Australia versus Ypsilanti, Michigan, as Rochelle Splatt matches up against Scott Coletta, the #1 qualifier. This diminutive, and I mean little bitty lady, is really taking the sport by storm. The fans love her.
And they love Scott Coletta because they know he's going to cut some big numbers. Look at that. That's Kenny Bernstein pursuing his new hobby as a photographer. I guess if you don't have anything else to do on race day, you might as well come out and take some pictures.
Boy, does he burn up some film. And does Scott Coletta ever burn up the racetrack? #2 in the world last year, wants to lower that digit just one by late October. I'm losing the last name. She's Rochelle, just like Cher. She doesn't need a last name, especially one like that for somebody that goes 300 miles an hour. There she sits in the Luxor Hotel and Casino car with a brand new crew chief. That is Bob Brandt, just walking away. Does he look familiar? Well, maybe a few years older. He was the crew chief, the Weasel, as they called him, for Don Prudhomme in the glory years of the Army funny cars.
4 times consecutive a Winston champion, and Bob Brandt was the man responsible for Don Prudhomme's performance. Now he's taken over the tuning chores of the Luxor Hotel Casino car, driven by Rochelle Splatt, if you will. Of course, the #1 qualifier, Scott Coletta. And he goes up in smoke. Rochelle gets a giant break. She crosses the finish line at only a 5:06, and my goodness, look at her reaction time. She did get a break. A perfect light is .400. So Rochelle, by my calculations, was 143 thousandths of a second late. Scott Coletta had qualified at a 482 for the top spot and just flat overpowered this racetrack. Look how far ahead of Rochelle he was, based primarily on the reaction time advantage. So the #8 qualifier has pulled off an upset in Top Fuel. Here we are in round #2 of the Factory Hot Rods Pro Stock Eliminator, and you're looking at one of the very few Chevrolets in the field. That is Ray Franks. His opponent is David Rampy in the near lane in the Winnebago Oldsmobile Cutlass, and he has the lane choice.
Looked like a funny car burnout David Rampy laid down there. He's having some fun, and of course, Pro Stock is very, very popular in the South, as bodied car racing always has been with Winston Cup and Busch Grand National. Whatever, it's got a body on it, they lean a little more towards it, maybe some other parts of the country. And Rampy's having a good day.
Rampy had qualified in the #10 spot and a 7:13 beat Dale Brinsfield in the first round, and here faces Ray Franks, who did pull off the upset from his #15 qualifying spot. He beat Jim Yates' Pontiac in round #1. A final check of the car by the crew. Now it is all up to the driver to get it staged properly and leave on time. And we don't mean wait until you see the green light. You got to leave at the first flash of yellow.
500 cubic inches, carburetors, racing gasoline, 5-speed transmissions, 2,350 pounds with the drivers. That's a Pro Stock car. And David Rampy overcame a slide hole shot by Franks to win it. 7:19, 191 miles an hour to a close 7:22 at 189.
In our replay, you see the advantage that Ray Franks had. It was just about 2/100ths of a second. As they went down the racetrack, though, the power of David Rampy's Winnebago Cutlass began to pay off. He first pulled even with Ray Franks, and then as they neared the finish line, 1,320 feet away from the starting line, you can see the margin of victory. It was 11 thousandths of a second, just inches in distance. Here is the Ford Quality Care Ford Probe, driven by 10-time Winston champion Bob Glidden. His competition, none other than one of those fabulous Dodges, and you're on board with Darrell Alderman looking across the cockpit in the Dodge Daytona. The car he drove to a somewhat off-pace qualifying time of a 7:11, good for #6, though he did beat Ricky Smith in the first round.
Well, his opponent, Bob Glidden, the legend, just squeaked into the field. The 14 spot at 7:14 to beat Billy Ewing in round #1. To be fair about it, Bob Glidden has hit the wall from a technology standpoint with this Boss Ford Hemi motor that goes clear back to the late 60s, early 70s. He supposedly has some new wedge blocks from Ford. They've recast some new cylinder heads coming, and by the end of the season hopes to be a different Bob Glidden.
And the interesting thing to note, he started off the season in a new Ford Thunderbird. Now he has switched back to the Ford Probe, thinking it gives him a little bit of an advantage, kind of like the Dodges, a little shorter in wheelbase, and if they can get it stuck, watch him go. Let's ride with Darrell.
It was Alderman's clutch foot that moved first, a nice hole shot, and a great elapsed time. A 7.08 that nearly matches Warren Johnson's round 1 low ET, and a whopping speed of 194 miles an hour. Darrell Alderman goes on to the Final Four.
Here's Scott Jeffrey on the identical Mopar Parts Dodge to the one we just saw, run 7:08. His competition, the Dynagear Oldsmobile Cutlass, driven by Steve Schmidt.
You know, these Dodge Daytonas are a little long in the tooth and won't be around much longer. Only 3 or 4 more national events, and the new Dodge Avenger is scheduled to debut. And that's got the Olds guys a little concerned, and Bob Glidden. It's a longer wheelbase. To add better handling to the Dodges, ooh, look out.
Steve Schmidt out of Indianapolis, Indiana, qualified in the number 13 spot at a 7:14. Beat Mark Howick in a bit of an upset in the first round. His competitor, Scott Jeffrey, on the number 5 qualifier, a little off pace in the qualifying at only a 7:11, and he beat Troy Coughlin in the first round.
Pro stock is a game of hundredths, even thousandths of a second, and right now Scott Jeffrey on is 300ths behind his own teammate and Warren Johnson.
For Steve Schmidt, it would be quite an accomplishment indeed if he could lay away Jeffrey on here. Schmidt and his partner Dale Ike have gone into an engine development program, and a lot of the race cars out here are using a Schmidt-Ike engine. Now let's see if the engine builder could do any good. Maybe he can run quicker than Stink, but he left the starting line way too quick. That red light you saw just negated everything Steve Schmidt tried to do. He lost the moment that light came on, and Scott Jeffrey on was the winner. And look at the time. He did not improve. Only a 7:11. Here, you can see how early Schmidt was, a full 1/10 of a second before the green flashed on. Jeffrey on was pretty close to being on the number, and he advances into the semifinals. Here's the upset-minded Larry Morgan in the Castrol Super Clean car. You might call him the Johnson Killer. He whipped up on the kid in the first round. Now, here he is against dear old Dad. Steve?
The Dodgers have been running a lot of 7-Elevens. You just clicked off another one.
I moved around quite a bit. You know, it shook pretty good. I saw my teammate run that 7:08 in front of me. I really got excited. The guys from Wayne County, they're finding the right combination here on Sunday at the Winston Invitational.
You may get one of the Johnsons next round, like Warren.
Oh, probably. I'm sure about it. You know, it seems like it's always that way. We're going to have some fun up there.
Looking forward to that one.
So am I, Steve. That has definitely become the rivalry of record in pro stock. This man, Warren Johnson, against Scott Jeffrey on. And look at the damage to WJ's Oldsmobile Cutlass. This came in qualifying when he laid down the number 1 run at a 7:05, beating Mark Osborne in the first round. In replay, we're going back to the late evening hours on Saturday. WJ was in the near lane. That's Butch Abbott that was alongside. Everything was fine, a 7:05. Then the parachute came out, the car unloaded, and whammo, into the guardrail. Steve was there.
Well, Warren, damage to the car, but you're the low qualifier and the fastest pro stock driver in history, and I'll go down there with you. What do you think? What do you see?
Frame rail looks straight. Got a bent wheel on it. We got spare struts in the trailer. I can get a front end here by tomorrow morning, so we'll be ready.
Knew you would be.
And indeed, he made it to eliminations, though they had a lot of work to do.
And now he meets up with Larry Morgan, the number 9 qualifier at a 7:12. He put away Kurt Johnson, as Dave said earlier, in round number 1. And we've been talking about a possibility of Jeffrey and Warren Johnson getting together. That won't happen if Larry Morgan has anything to say about it in the Super Clean Oldsmobile.
The question on everybody's mind when elimination started earlier today was, how good is the Oldsmobile driven by Warren Johnson? How effective was Greg Anderson and the crew getting it repaired in time for the first round? Well, the answer, I think, came when he ran a 7:08 in that first round confrontation. Now he's up against Morgan. Down track they go, but that race was decided at the starting line. A giant advantage by Larry Morgan. Great reaction time, as you see, a 7:19. Warren Johnson ran 7:18. And the question is, which one of these guys is going to go tell the boss he was that late? Here's how late he was. Watch again in replay. Look at the car in the far lane. It moves perceptibly. That's the 1/10 of a second advantage for you at the starting line. That's Larry Morgan cutting another light and laying away yet another Johnson. This time, the reigning Winston champion goes down to defeat, as Larry Morgan has more than a car length lead when they cross the finish line. He heads into the semifinals to race Scott Jeffrey on. Here's some folks that are not scowling. They're in round number 2, the semifinals at Top Fuel. Rochelle is signing autographs while the crew, headed up by Bob Brandt, hard at work preparing the race car for the competition with Don Prudhoe.
How about the first pair in funny car? The only 2 fuel coupes that have ever gone over 300 miles an hour side by side here at the Rock. Al Hoffman, the Western Auto Slick 50 Special, Dodge Daytona. Dodge Daytona's having a lot of luck in any trim here at this race. In a hurry to get back after the burnout, doesn't want too much engine heat, and there is the first over 300, the Ruck Doctor car of Jim Epler.
And Epler might already have used up his portion of luck just being here in round number 1. He actually was the first alternate, the number 9 qualifier. His time was respectable enough, a 5:25, and when Richard Hartman, driving the Johnny West car, could not make the call for round number 2, Epler shows up to race against Al Hoffman. Now, Hoffman's qualified number 1. We saw just a bit earlier, a 5:02, great elapsed time, but an incredible 300-plus miles an hour to become the first driver to run 300 miles an hour on 2 different racetracks. He did it earlier at Phoenix.
And that's Mike Klober, one of the secrets behind that kind of horsepower, who always checks his watch. We're never really sure why, but it's just something he does. And there's Helen Hoffman. She always pats the body just like that. They've all got their little deals that they go through, right?
Idiosyncrasies. I mean, Joe Amato wears Snoopy shorts. Didn't bring him a lot of luck at this race because he didn't even qualify in Top Fuel. Here's round number 1. Epler and Hoffman. Let's watch and listen as some 10,000 horsepower is unleashed at the Rock. A loss of traction for Epler, but a win in the round as the number 1 qualifier is out of here. Epler's time, an off-pace 5:38 at 240. Hoffman stops on the track.
You're watching Sky Sports.
Huge crowd on hand today looking on. We're in funny car round number 1.
And there is the McDonald's car of Cruz Pedregon, hoping to have the same success his teammate did in the first round of Top Fuel, Corey McLennan. And here we're looking inside the car of Whit Bazemore, the fast orange machine. Now, don't think that's the same Bazemore you may be familiar with from videos like In They Walked Away 3, because thanks to that man, Rob Flynn, this is a whole new operation. Whit Bazemore qualified number 7 at a 5:22, while Cruz Pedregon, the man he's racing here right now, qualified number 2 at a sizzling 5:08. But back to Bazemore, no more fires, no more engine explosions. Rob Flynn and crew have got it on track, and it makes it a car that Pedregon's got to worry a bit about.
Great start for both drivers. And problems for Pedregon, and Whit Bazemore lays down a fine and conservative 5:24 at 284 miles an hour. The difficulties for Pedregon forcing him to lift. Here we go. Look at this one again. It is Cruz Pedregon in the far lane and Whit Bazemore. Just about identical reaction times, less than 1/100th of a second separating the two until the 3/4 point on the racetrack. And the McDonald's Oldsmobile hazes the tires, then starts mixing up the cylinders, flashes of flame indicating problems, and Bazemore, with a fine 5:24, takes the win and advances to the Final Four.
This is a nice matchup. Don the Snake Prudhoe, the legend, one of the winningest drag racers ever, against the 1993 Australian national champion, Rochelle Splatt. Now, Rochelle has not had good luck against Don Prudhoe. She's raced him twice this year. The Snake has beat her both times. Is she up to the task? We'll see. Now, she has the big front wheels on her car. So does the Snake, so you can compare the reaction times. But it makes reaction times look a little slower than the little bitty front wheels. Snake out by a couple of hundreds. Rochelle hanging in there, but not enough. The Snake pulls off to a 5 flat at 284 miles an hour. Rochelle, well, she was pretty close at a 5:08, 276. Well, the Snake, without a lot of venom, kind of slithers his way into the final with a 5 flat. Yeah.
Yeah, with that little gal, you never know what they're going to run over there. And I'm just happy. You know, it's drag race. You just never know. You know, they're doing a great job, and Wes is doing a great job on our car. But these things, round and round, they're really difficult. But we're just pleased to get by the round.
Happy for you.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Pleased to get by the round. How many times have we heard that already today? And this race is far from over.
I think Wes certainly said it all without revealing any speed secrets. Don't smoke the tires. Lee Beard has got to be thinking the same way. He didn't want a 5 flat, maybe a little bit less than that. On board with Tommy Johnson Jr., the right hand on the brake, the left hand on the butterfly steering wheel. It's actually shaped like a butterfly with 2 wings. He'll hold 5,000 horsepower. Somehow it may take all of his young strength. When he releases that brake, he mashes on the gas at the same time, and that baby is gone. And speaking of gone, traction and motor have disappeared for Tommy Johnson Jr. If you're riding with him, you lose. Corey McClanahan then wins. Woo, nice. 495 at 287 miles per hour, and some serious engine damage to the Tommy Johnson Jr. car.
Let's take a look at that one again. This one was some severe loss of traction. If I had to guess, maybe over-revved it just a little bit, and as he did, a pop out of the engine. That was the flash of flame. But look at Corey Mack. No smoke coming off the tires there. That moves him into the finals against Don Prudhomme. Youth against experience.
I guess if the funny cars could be called fuel coupes, the Pro Stocks could be called flatteringly the gas guzzlers, because they do use gasoline. It's about 114 octane, and it costs more than alcohol fuel. It's about $5 a gallon.
You're on board with Scott Jeffrey on as he approaches the starting line. That's his crew chief, Mike Sullivan. For Jeffrey on, he's got the lane choice here with a 7-11 in the previous round, but he is racing the guy that has pulled off 2 giant upsets. Single-handedly, Larry Morgan in the Castrol Super Clean car has disposed of the Johnson & Johnson team.
Absolutely eradicated him, but now he's up against a quicker car.
Both drivers taking their time. The 2 lights at the top of the tree indicate they're ready. The tree goes green.
And it is a beautiful start. No advantage there one way or the other. Advantage Dodge. 712 at 193 miles an hour to Morgan 720. 191 miles an hour. So Scott Jeffrey on roars his way into the finals.
As we watch again in replay, Larry Morgan needed one thing in this race, and he did not get it. He got just a smidgen, a few thousandths of a second, but he needed hundredths of a second advantage at the start. Why? Because he was unable to run the number. Scott Jeffrey nearly duplicated his previous round performance. He has been the ultimate picture of consistency. 2 7-11s, a 7-12 on this run, while Larry Morgan trailed at a 7-20. That's a full car length at the finish. Here is the Winnebago. I test out, driven by David Rampy, and inside the race car, a duplicate of Jeffrey on's entry. This is Darrell Alderman in the other Dodge.
And much like his teammate Jeffrey Darrell also holds down a full-time job in the family pipeline company, literally out digging ditches, then flies in on the weekend to shoot the bad guys. David Rampy, far side, Alderman near lane. Rampy moved first. But Alderman sprints away. It will be an all-Dodge final, folks, at 712, 193 miles an hour. All right, it is Chuck Etchells versus Whit Bazemore.
The final 4 of Funny Car at the Winston Select Invitational, and for Chuck Etchells, he's got to be thinking 2 weeks ago at Gainesville, Florida, again, the final 4, and look what happened. A huge fire billowed out from underneath the Kendall GT1 Dodge. The parachutes burned off. The tires let go. He scraped off the speed against the guardrail. The car coming to a stop in a cloud of smoke. And then, while everybody held their breath, including Etchells, he climbed out through the roof hatch. A harrowing incident indeed, but John Medlin and crew totally disassembled the Kendall Dodge all the way down to the bare frame rails. They repainted it and brought it back to new, and here he is, racing with Bazemore in the fast orange Dodge Daytona.
But remember in the previous round, Bazemore right there in the mid-520s. He's not a car to be taken lightly anymore. They both smoked the tires. Etchells recovers first. A 535 at only 269 miles an hour. Bazemore may have been a little gun-shy about over-revving it, smoking the tires, and doing some expensive mechanical damage, only 164 miles an hour. Now this has all the ingredients to be a real beauty. KC, Hollywood Spurlock, the Fruit of the Loom team, up against Jim Epler. Even though Epler got in as an alternate, forget that. He's had 2 runs to tune it up.
Steve, on paper, this may be one of the best races of the day. Only a thousandth of a second separate these 2 cars based on their previous round performance, and the quicker of the 2 gets to pick the lane, and it was KC Hollywood Spurlock. Down to the far end, here's Steve.
You know, Chucky, I think patience and moderation may be the key words to winning on this track today.
It might be, Steve. I don't know. I messed up the burnout. Was all mad at myself about that, but crew's doing a great job. Medlin's hanging in there, and we're happy.
That was almost a quarter-mile burnout.
Yeah, it lit the tires up, but I didn't see him out there, so I figured, well, you know, keep her going. You never know what happens.
Never give up.
Of course, Etchells is noted for having lots of top-end horsepower. That's evidenced by the tire smoke. He may have to control it in the final round. Ronnie Swearingen acting as traffic cop, pulling up his driver, Hollywood Spurlock, to the point he wants on the racetrack before Casey gets into the staging procedure.
As far as a balance of power and attraction, this may be the trickiest round of the day. The sun's still fairly high. It'll probably be down a bit for the final. And don't you know, Mike Clover knows that. He rips off a piece of tape off the injector that changes the idle of the engine. Let's speed up just a little bit. Free stage. Who moves in first? Spurlock. Epler. They're gone. Whoa, Epler almost tags the wall. Still doesn't give up. Gets back on the throttle, but it's not enough. Spurlock wins it at 544, only 261 miles an hour. Bob?
Well, wasn't a work of art, but it gets you in the finals.
No, it's not quite what we were looking for, but sometimes it's an equal balance between clutch and motor. And if you take one away, the other's not as efficient, and we missed a little bit, but we'll be all right next round.
Conditions a lot different now than they were earlier today?
No, that's equally as bad.
Well, they're in the final. Wasn't pretty, but they're in the finals.
Well, if it wasn't pretty for Spurlock and Swearingen, take a look at what it was for Jim Epler. Almost wore the shiny off when he got very close to the outside barrier. He then lifted, got back into the lane, and kept his foot in it, but it was for naught as Spurlock crossed the finish line with a 544.
You're watching Sky Sports.
American Sports Cavalcade. The biggest crowd in the history of Rockingham. Dragway has jammed the new grandstands for this Winston Select Invitational. And moving towards the staging lanes, maybe that's where they're cheering. It's the School Bandit car of Don the Snake Prudhomme. It will be the last time he ever goes down the Rockingham quarter mile when he faces off with Corey McClanathan. Right now, it's Pro Stock final round time. Dodge versus Dodge.
Double Dodge duty, if you could say it, as Scott Jeffrey on and Darrell Alderman get ready to battle it out, and we have dueling in-car cameras.
Now, these two drivers met head-to-head in the final round of the Ford Quality Care Nationals in Phoenix earlier this year, and it was Scott Jeffrey on coming out on top. Darrell Alderman still doesn't have a win in his comeback that is 1994. Even though this is a non-points event, he'd still take the money, I guarantee you that. And I think maybe Jeffrey on has the better of the two cars.
Well, it doesn't show up on paper. Darrell Alderman's got the quicker time. He ran a 7:08 in the second round. The best that Scott Jeffrey on has been able to muster is a 7:10, and he has slowed down by 100th of a second in each of the subsequent rounds. So if you look at it from the paper point of view, you got to give it to Alderman. But when reaction time is so critical, particularly in these closely matched cars, it is a toss-up, a pick-up. Who do you pick?
Well, remember, these two guys have to live in the same trailer. It's one thing to be 10 rigs up and just got hole-shotted, but here, I mean, they have to face each other. I don't know. It's a pick-em deal. I wouldn't ride with either one of them. Actually, I have to.
I'd love to.
And there's Alderman, bitten his teeth. It is Alderman on a hole shot. You were right, Mac. A 7:16. I was right, too. Beat Jeffrey on's quicker 7:13. So Jeffrey on did have the better car. Alderman, the better reaction time. Let's go to the starting line and Bob.
You're smiling. I know you call yourselves co-crew chiefs and everybody wants to win for the team, but that's a nice win for Darrell.
Yeah, I was real happy for Darrell because he needs that first win. And this will really give him a lot of confidence and get us going.
You guys are rolling out those 7-Elevens with regularity here this weekend.
Yeah, we were off and we were trying some stuff here since this was a race to test that, and we just tried a lot of different stuff and then came back with our baseline for race day.
Well, they came back and kicked everybody in the Pro Stock category. Thanks to Dave. Congratulations to Darrell Alderman with the big win.
And while the congratulations go for the win, he did it on his driving, not on the performance of the race car. It ran only a 7:16, his slowest time of the day. And incredibly, Scott kept his string intact. He slowed down another 100th of a second from the semifinals to the championship round. The margin slim at the finish. Look at that, a half a car length. Darrell Alderman the winner.
Well, Darrell, you were the quick draw champ. Your 16 defeated Scott's 13.
Oh, gosh, I thought it was a lot closer than that. Of course, you know, Scott did the same thing to me at Phoenix, and I'm sure it'll be that way. As I said earlier, Scott's definitely got my respect, and I'm a little nervous here. This is my first win in '94.
Forgot how to do it?
Yeah. Hey, and I want to thank the sponsors, Mopar, and it's just great to have 2 Mopars in the final here. And I want to dedicate this race to my Grandma McLean.
There's the Fruit of the Loom car with the roof hatch up to get some fresh air in the machine. That is Casey Spurlock to be up against Chuck Etchell, the comeback kid, after the huge fire in Gainesville in the final round.
While they had a lot of work between that race and this one, there was also a lot of work for Medlin and crew between rounds. Earlier, Steve took a look.
John Medlin has called for an engine change in the Chuck Etchell's funny car, and not because there's anything really wrong with it.
No, there's nothing wrong with the motor, Steve. We just wanted to put a fresh piece in there for the final.
Do you find the funny car more difficult to tune consistently than the dragsters you've worked with before?
Actually, I really enjoy the funny car very much. The first half of the racetrack, the funny car responds to the changes real well. The difficult part about it, and different from a dragster, it has no wing. And so in the second half of the track with a car like this, it has a lot of power. It's very difficult to control the amount of power because you can't offset it with downforce from a wing.
Looks like you figured it out.
Well, I don't feel like we figured it out as well as I'd like to. We're going to try to do a little better in the second half on the final.
Last season, John Medlin served as the crew chief for Don the Snake Prudhomme.
This race will be won, I predict, by who best masters the clutch and horsepower combination. It's a race really between John Medlin and young Ron Swearingen on the other side. The drivers are almost a bit earlier as long as they leave anywhere near on time.
Steve, I think the answer will come well before the finish line. Just look at which car's putting out the least amount of smoke, indicating loss of traction. Well, so much for predictions we didn't take into account. KC Spurlock's dropped cylinders, no fire in the motor. Let's go to the starting line. Here's Bob.
John Medlin, it's got to be the happiest day since your return to the tuning job.
Absolutely. The crew did a fantastic job after the fire that we had last race. We couldn't be any happier.
How about for John Medlin?
I'm thrilled to death.
Watch this. In the far lane, Spurlock's clutch was not aggressive enough to load the engine possibly hard enough to fire those cylinders, Dave.
And you see the raw fuel coming out of the exhaust header. That's the best indicator in the world that the dropped cylinders, and we're talking about 650 to 700 horsepower per cylinder, that's no longer pulling that car down the track. Etchell wins it with a great 5:29 at 276.
Chuck, after burning your car to the ground 3 weeks ago in Gainesville, this has to feel good, and it'll help pay some of the bills.
It sure will, Steve. You know, we're just happy to get the Kendall Super Winch Dodge into the final and win the thing. I mean, John Medlin, the whole crew, great job. I mean, it shows what they're made of to fix this mess.
When it started to smoke the tires, you had to think, oh no, where is he?
Well, yeah, I was kind of looking for him, but I was trying to keep it in the groove. You know, Spurlock's tough, those guys are tough, and like I said, we're just happy to be here.
When you can run a 5:29 with smoke billowing off the tires, that's pretty impressive.
Is that what it ran? Well, I didn't think it smoked the tires as hard as it did the other runs, I mean, or it did it later. You know, like I say, when you're in the finals, you're thinking one thing, finish line.
Great job. Dave McClellan?
Steve, when he said did it later, that means that they moved the timer way down track, trying to soften up the impact of all that horsepower. That's a problem this man has as well. Lee Beard, the crew chief for Corey McLenithan at the wheel of the McDonald's dragster owned by Larry Miner. He is up against none other than the legendary Don the Snake Prudhomme in his final season, and earlier, Steve had a chance to talk with him.
When Don Prudhomme dubbed his '94 tour the Final Strike, Snake, I think you meant strike as much as you did final.
I guess so. You know, I certainly wanted to go out in a winning way, and it was just a matter of getting a team together. I knew I still had the capability of driving the car, and if I could just get a guy like Wes Cerny, which I did, I figured we'd have a good shot at having a great year.
Take no prisoners, machine gun the lifeboats, right?
Well, that's right. You know, I've been driving as hard as I can drive out there, and I'm enjoying it. I'll tell you, this is probably my one of my finest years in drag racing. I'm just having a great time.
And look what's happening on the starting line. Neither driver will stage. They're both sitting in the pre-stage beams, but nobody's pulling forward.
The Snake likes to stage last. Sometimes it's better off to just let him do it. Buster Couch looks over. He's not going to get involved.
Who's going to break? Corey Mack's in. Snake's in. And Corey Mack red light. Oh, the snake struck on that one. That is experience talking. As Don Prudhomme knew that if he staged immediately, psychologically, he had the advantage over Corey Mack and forced him into the red light. Back to the starting line, here's Bob.
Wes Ernie, big win there for the Snake. Looked like a little game playing on the line.
Wasn't just a big win for the Snake, it was a big win for these two guys, Rick Kessel and myself. We've had a good time today. All the rest of the guys in the crew, we just want to thank them for doing a good job and getting it here with all the parts intact and everything ready to go every time.
Just a great job. Congratulations to Wes and the entire gang. Big win there for the Snake. David?
If you don't think a driver makes a difference, listen to the times. 4:90 for Corey Mack, 4:94 for Prudhomme, and I would say that the Snake's experience definitely paid off there. Just a few moments ago, Corey Mack was talking to the instructor about the driving lesson he had just received. Steve?
Snake, after that little staging battle, I thought we might have some words down here, all our pro stock, but no.
No, it was fine. It was fine. I was just waiting for him to go in, and I set my
You were waiting a long time,
Well,
though.
I wait a little bit, but, you know, that's the way it goes. I want to say hi to my wife, Lynn. I wish she was here. It's great.
And Donna, way at college in Arizona.
Yeah, Donna, I hope she's watching. You know, the Skull Bandit crew, Wes Ernie, all the guys, great job. It's a nice way to end up a racing career, I can tell you, by winning a race. I'm thrilled.
You won that, I think, a little bit on experience up there, huh?
Well, I like to think so. I mean, a little bit, I guess. After 30 years, you learn a little something up there. And, you know, he's a great driver, and the McDonald's team are a great team, and I'm just proud that the Skull Bandit car put it in the winner's circle.
We're proud of you. Dave McClellan, take us home.
Well, the Snake has won another one here in his final strike tour, 1994. For Steve Evans and Bob Fry, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Rockingham Dragway.